What's going on, Duke fans? It's Jack here, and today we are looking ahead to the Duke versus SMU preview. And before I get moving ahead with our preview for today, just want to say thank you to you guys who commented, checking in on JD. Really appreciate it. I hope to have him back on the program after the game this Saturday. So with that being said, this is going to be the biggest test for Duke since Louisville. Yeah, I would say since Louisville and arguably since Auburn. Obviously not as big of a test as Auburn, but in the games that have happened since, maybe you could throw Georgia Tech in there, although I think Duke caught them at the right time. I think Georgia Tech will get better as the year goes on. Louisville had a number of injuries. They weren't quite the team that I thought Duke would be playing. And still, for the first 30 minutes, that was a really close competitive game. This SMU team, I guess one of the first things I want to say is they've kind of snuck up on me. I haven't given them credit for being a solid ACC team. They are 11-2 to start the season under first-year coach Andy Enfield, who came over after having pretty good success at USC. I think most of us remember him from his run at Florida Gulf Coast at Dunk City. And it wasn't like the program was in really rough shape. Last year they went 20-13, 11-7, which was fifth in the AAC conference. So they had some pieces to build with, but Coach Enfield did bring in a lot of new faces. Of their, if I'm going to be generous, 10 rotation players, only 3 returned from last year's SMU team. So there's a lot of new faces for SMU. And they have got off, like I said, to a pretty good start. 11-2, really solid. They've played 6 power conference opponents to start the season. They are 4-2 in those matchups. They're 5-1. 4-1. I don't think Butler is a power conference team, as I am saying this live here. So I had that one wrong. But in terms of major matchups, I guess the 2 losses are at Butler, which they lost 81-70, and then a close home game, which they lost to Mississippi State. Let's see here, 84-79. So, you're 15 points away from being undefeated. Now, there were a couple of close wins that they had, but for the most part, their other games against power conference opponents, they beat LSU 74-64. Washington State is also not a power conference opponent. They have dropped out. They beat them 77-60, at least a brand name, if you will. And then they're 2-0 in conference to start the season, beating Virginia 63-51 at home. And then a game which was closer than the score might indicate, they beat Boston College 103-77 at Boston College and really ran away with it late. And this SMU team is led by Boopie Miller. So let's get into SMU right now. And I'm going to go through their entire roster, who I project to play in this game, what their roles are going to be, and how they stack up against Duke. And then afterwards, I'll get into what I think the keys are for Duke in this game against SMU, what they need to do well, and how Duke has been progressing as the year has gone on. So, with that being said, I have the stats pulled up here for SMU to start the season in their 13 games. As I said, led by Boopie Miller, who stayed in the conference. It's still weird to me that SMU is in the ACC. So Duke is going to be playing their first conference game at SMU this Saturday. And he stayed in conference. We are familiar with Boopie Miller. He played at Wake Forest last year, where he had 2 games against Duke. Game 1 in the loss, not so great, 3 points, 3 assists. Game 2 in the win, pretty good, 15 points, 5 assists for Boopie. And I got to tell you, Wake Forest sure misses Boopy Miller. They have been struggling without their point guard this year. And Boopy Miller, almost 6 assists per game, 1.5 steals. He's only shooting 28% from 3 to start the year, but he is a career 37% shooter from beyond the arc. So I fully expect he's going to hit three-pointers in this game against Duke. The only real negative besides that with Boopy's game this year, turnovers. I know he's got a big load in terms of how much of the offense he has to carry for big lift for the SMU Mustangs, but he is averaging over 2.5 turnovers per game. That is one area where I think Duke has the advantage, is the turnover battle. Their next leading scorer actually comes off the bench, and that's Chuck Harris, one of the 3 returners from SMU. 12 points per game. He's a great three-point shooter. 2 makes per game, over 2 makes per game. At 49%, he has been a spark plug for SMU off the bench, and is certainly an X factor in this game against Duke, because he's one of the few guys on this roster who doesn't necessarily need Boopy Miller to set them up. And that's a really important factor that we'll get into later on as we go through this video. Matt Cross is a transfer from UMass, but that's not where he started his career. He started his career at Miami, then spent a season with Louisville, and now is on his 3rd ACC team, which, again, weird to say, at SMU. He had a really good game at Boston College. It was a homecoming for him. And on the season, he is averaging almost 11 points. And the big key for Matt Cross is he's their leading rebounder. He's 6'7", 230. He plays the small forward position, so he will be matched up with Con Knipple. And at 8 rebounds per game, he is their leading rebounder, as I just said. He also averages about 2 assists and 1 steal per game. And he, too, shoots the three-pointer pretty well at 39, if you want to round up, 40% from 3. Their next leading scorer also comes off the bench as of late. Matt Cross, as I said, starts. You've got 2 starters and 2 guys off the bench. Kind of nice depth for this SMU team in Cario Kendo. Now, Kendo started his career at the JUCO level at Florida Southwestern, then went to Georgia for 2 seasons where he was their leading scorer, albeit on a pretty bad Georgia team. Last year, he transferred to Oregon and was part of their NCAA tournament team where they won their first round matchup against South Carolina. And he did start the year starting more games, but as of late, he's been coming off the bench. He, too, can be a bit of an X factor. He's a big guard, around 6'4", 220. So, he can match up with Sion James to an extent. And he's been their leading scorer in 3 of 13 games this year. But more importantly, in those 6, more high-profile matchups that I mentioned before, not high major, but high-profile, he was their leading scorer in 2 of those 6 games. So he has a potential to have a big game in this one against Duke. Next up, they're starting 2 guards. So we've got the starting point guard, Boopy Miller, starting small forward, Matt Cross, and now the starting 2 guard, BJ Edwards. Started his career at Tennessee. He, along with Chuck Harris, is a returner on this team. This is his 2nd season at SMU, averaging 10 points, about 3.5 assists, almost 4 rebounds per game. He's their best perimeter defender, nearly 2.5 steals per game. He can shoot the 3 as well, about 35%, and he can also get to the basket, 60% makes at the 2-point level. So pretty good rates there for BJ Edwards. The one thing I have noticed, though, in box scores, the only game I should say I watched was the Boston College game, just to be clear. But looking at box scores, he did struggle in some of the high-profile matchups. So I'm curious if that trend will continue. Maybe not. They are going to be at home. I expect the SMU fans to be into this game, so maybe BJ can score a little bit better in this high-profile matchup. Now, their starting center is one of the few underclassmen, honestly, the only underclassman who really gets playing time for SMU, and that's Samet Yigitoglu. And Igatoglu had some foul difficulties in the game against Boston College, but he is the anchor of their defense at 7'2", averaging nearly 10 points, 6 rebounds, and a block per game. He is an interior scorer. He can defend the rim and is going to be a good matchup with him versus Karaman Malawach. And their last starter is Johan Traore. Started his career at Auburn. Last year went to UC Santa Barbara, where he averaged 15 points per game. And as a 6'11", 235-pound player, he is part of, the international contingent for this SMU team. He's from France. I should have mentioned Igatoglu is from Turkey. And the next guy, Keon Ambrose Hilton, is from Canada. And Traore and Hilton provide size and also the ability to shoot the three, respectively at 32 and 37% from distance. Traore starts. Ambrose Hilton plays a decent amount and can also, score inside and out. And at 6'11" and 6'9", respectively, great size for SMU. Lastly, Gerald Colbert is their backup big man. The first 20 minutes against Boston College, I thought he looked pretty raw. And then the last 10, 15 minutes when SMU got going, he had some good defensive plays. He had a nice hook shot, a couple good passes. He showed me more than I thought he had in his game. But similar to Igatoglu, he is, interior scoring only. He is their leading shot blocker at 1.2 per game, which is notable because he only plays 11 minutes per game. So he's a pretty good shot blocker. That is Jared Colbert. Those are the primary 9. Tibet Goriner is the 10th guy. If he plays in this game, it will be less, certainly less than 5 minutes, probably 2 or less realistically. So, as I mentioned, their starting lineup, Boopy Miller, BJ Edwards, Matt Cross, Johan Traore, and Samet Igatoglu. And that goes 6 foot, 6'3", 6'7", 6'11", 7'2". So similar to the Auburn game, this team has the size to match up with Duke, which I think is notable. They are on KenPom 20th in the country in offense and 90th in defense. So a really good to great offense, which is highlighted by their three-point shooting, but also their ability to score inside the arc. They're top 30 in the country from field goal percentage and three-point percentage. This is just a really good offensive team. Some other notes, I'll go quickly here, some quick hitters on the team in terms of some individual quick hitters. Matt Cross has the ability to rebound and go. So outside of Boopy Miller, BJ Edwards is, if Boopy Miller is the pilot of SMU, BJ Edwards is the co-pilot. But Matt Cross, I'm a Knicks fan, so Matt Cross, if you guys watch Knicks basketball, I'm not saying he's Josh Hart, but he has that ability similar to a Josh Hart, but he doesn't do it nearly as often, to take the ball, rebound it, and then take it full court and put pressure on the opposing defense. As I mentioned before, BJ Edwards can score inside. The key to the SMU offense, the reason their three-point shooting is as good as it is Boopy Miller and his ability to penetrate the defense and kick out and find open shooters. That is the key for SMU. If Duke can limit Boopy Miller's ability to get into the paint and find either the open shooter or the ability to spray the ball around, and that next pass, that hockey assist, if you will, that is an X factor for Duke. So that's pretty much it on the SMU side of things. Now, Duke, what are the 3 keys for Duke in this game against SMU? So number 1, as I just said, you gotta limit Boopy Miller. He is the pilot of this team. He is the key of this team. And if Duke, whether that's Sion James or Tyrese Proctor, and I'm not sure who it's going to be. I'm very curious because typically Proctor guards the team's best scorer, but that's not necessarily the point guard. But in this matchup, it is. So if I had to guess, Proctor's probably on Boopy Miller. If he can limit his ability to get into the paint and kick out, If Boobie Miller has 18 points and 2 assists, I think Duke's in good shape. If Boobie Miller has 12 points, 7 assists, I think it could be a tough game for Duke. So I just think it's important that we stay home and make Boopie score tough mid-range or floaters, because he's not going to be able to get to the rim when Malawach is in. But he has an ability to score, from that mid-range and floater area. He's a really good college point guard. Next, got to get off to a good start in this one. I expect SMU fans to be rocking and ready to go. It's a smaller gym from what I heard in the Boston College game. So I do expect it to be a loud atmosphere. It's Duke. All their fans are going to be there. It's the biggest game of the year. And unfortunately, we have a little bit of a track record of getting out to slow starts. I think this is it's the best team Duke has played since Auburn. They're not there's a few tiers before Auburn as far as I'm concerned. But with all of that being said, it's a conference game. Duke cannot afford to get down, 10, 12 points early to SMU. And they've really got to do a good job, limiting the three-point shooting for SMU as best they can. And lastly, Cooper Flagg has got to stay out of foul trouble. Now, Cooper, I was kind of surprised it didn't become a problem early in the season, but as the year has gone on, there's been a few more instances where he's picked up 2 fouls in the first half. Or the Louisville game, he had 4 fouls with about 10 or 11 minutes to go in that game. It's important because Cooper has been, in big games, the steadying factor for this Duke team. Now, there's a little bit of a caveat to that. In the Louisville game, as we all know, Duke went on their big run once Cooper went to the bench. And even in the most recent game, where he was by far the best player against Virginia Tech, I thought Duke as a team got going when Cooper got his second foul. I thought the ball movement was a little bit better. They sprayed it around. Shots didn't necessarily fall immediately, but I thought guys did a better job of just being either with, player movement or ball movement offensively. And so I don't think Duke is going to win this game without Cooper Flagg, but I do think that is notable and something that's worth watching as the year goes on. So with that being said, I think on the Duke side of things, it's important for us to get off to a good start. Get Konkanippel going early, and if he's not going early, let's get Evans going because we're going to need the three-point shooting to. I don't think we'll be able to completely shut off SMU's three-point shooting. They're a good team. And I guess another key, a bonus key for this game, if you will, is limiting SMU's ability to get into transition, because that's when they're by far at their best. If they have to play against a set Duke defense, it's going to be a tough game for SMU. As of right now, Duke is up to number 1 on KenPom in defense, which is just remarkable. But when as we know, this Duke roster is built to defend. As the offense continues to climb, which it has been, spoiler alert, they're up to the top 10 on KenPom offensively. So with all of that being said, this could be a tough game, and I'll leave it at this. If Duke is at their A game, even if SMU is at their A game, Duke's going to win by 10 points. If SMU is at their A game and Duke's at their B game, Duke is still going to win this game by 5 points or so. But if SMU has their A game and Duke is, C+, they could lose a close one here at SMU. So it's going to be important that the guys get off to good starts. They get some steadying presence from, the veterans that they have in Proctor and Sion James and Malik Brown and Mason Gillis, who's been playing better of late. And X factor for Duke, I think I'm going to go out on a limb. I think Caleb Foster is going to give them a good performance in this game with SMU. He was the 7th guy off the bench last game against Virginia Tech. I know he didn't score from the field, but I did think he played better overall. And I think we're going to need, somebody to give us a little bit of a surprising performance if we want to win this game comfortably. But if we don't get that, it's going to be a close game, I think. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I think it's going to be a fun game. at SMU, a close game, but I think Duke will win by 5 to 15 points. So, again, let me know what you guys think. If you're new, subscribe to the channel. We want to see you guys game after game as we grow this Talking Ball channel. And share it with your friends who like, Duke basketball. They like the NBA draft. I'll be getting into that soon. And I'll see you guys after the game on Saturday. Peace.